right, welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive.
Let's do it.
Today, we're tackling something you experience all the time, but probably don't give much thought to: crowd management.
Oh, yeah. Fascinating stuff.
I dove into a ton of research for this one, and I gotta say, the amount of work that goes into keeping us safe at concerts, festivals, you name it, it's incredible.
It really is. You know, a staggering 90% of crowd management happens before the event even starts.
Seriously, 90%. I knew there's planning involved, but that's mind-blowing.
It is. It's all about being proactive. Crowd management is really about setting the stage for a successful event. It's about, anticipating problems and having solutions in place before they even pop up.
So it's like a giant game of chess, but with people.
Uh-huh. Exactly.
Yeah.
One of the first things crowd managers consider is the crowd itself. I
Mm.
mean, who are these people? What's the age range?
Right.
Have they been to similar events before? Are they coming in groups?
Right, because I'd imagine a family-friendly concert would require a totally different approach than a massive rock festival.
Exactly. And then there's the venue, the space itself. Is it indoors? Outdoors? Are people sitting or moving around? What's the ground like? Even something as basic as grass versus concrete can be a factor, especially if, bad weather hits.
Wow, so it's not just the venue, it's how people will use it
Yeah.
and how those conditions might change.
Yeah, precisely. Oh, and here's an interesting one. Even the client, the performer, or the speaker themselves can really influence crowd management planning.
Wait, really? How so?
Well, let's say you've got a super popular band headlining a festival. If their set isn't scheduled carefully, you could end up with this huge bottleneck as everyone rushes to the stage. And that can be dangerous, especially if there are limited exits.
That makes sense. So they're basically playing chess with the schedule to keep things moving smoothly.
Exactly, and it doesn't stop there. They also have to coordinate with, external groups, the police, transportation,
Yep.
emergency services.
It sounds like a huge collaborative effort.
It is. You can have the best plan in the world, but if it's not properly coordinated, things can go south very quickly.
And speaking of essential elements, there's the personnel. Having the right people on the ground with the right training, that makes all the difference.
I bet the skills needed for, say, a film premiere must be totally different from what you'd need for a football stadium.
Oh, absolutely. Crowd management teams are very strategic about who they select and how they train them based on the event. You need people who can think on their feet, adapt to changing situations.
It's like a highly specialized field within event management. So we've covered the crowd, the venue, the client, working with all these other organizations, and how important skilled people are. What about the event itself? Does that impact the planning process?
It totally does. Think about like a free event versus a ticketed one. The duration, the genre, these all influence the approach. A multi-day music festival is a whole different animal compared to a 2-hour concert. Right, with a festival, you've got people coming and going constantly, maybe camping overnight, potential weather changes over several days.
Exactly. It adds so many layers. And you brought up weather. That can really make or break an outdoor event. Crowd managers have to be prepared for everything from, sudden downpours to extreme heat, even high winds that could damage those temporary structures they often use.
It reminds me of that story I read about a carnival that got hit by a sudden storm. Everyone tried to leave at once, and it totally overwhelmed the nearby train station.
Oh, yeah. Those are the kind of scenarios that keep crowd managers up at night. They try to plan for everything, but sometimes Mother Nature just throws a curveball.
It's amazing how much thought goes into something that, for most of us, is just a fun day out. I'm starting to really understand why 90% of the work is done beforehand.
It's all about laying the groundwork for a smooth and safe experience. But the event itself, that's when things really get interesting.
Okay, so we've talked about all the prep work, the before phase, but what happens when the event kicks off? What goes on behind the scenes during the during phase?
Well, that's when all that planning we talked about gets put into action. Crowd managers shift their focus to implementing the plan, closely monitoring the crowd, and trying to stay one step ahead of any problems. It's all about observation and adapting.
So even with all that preparation, they still need to be flexible.
Oh, absolutely. Things can change so quickly. For big events, they actually start managing crowds pretty far from the event location itself.
You mean like directing traffic flow from highways or public transit so everyone doesn't clog up the area right around the venue?
Exactly. They might use signs to guide people to different entrances, adjust public transportation schedules, even close some roads temporarily. It's all about anticipating how people will move and preventing those big bottlenecks.
So crowd flow is key. What else are they focusing on during the event itself?
Well, there are the cues, the lines. making sure those move smoothly, people aren't waiting forever. There's clear communication about wait times. Nobody wants to be stuck in a line that's not moving.
Definitely not. What about barriers? They seem pretty common for managing crowds, but they can sometimes feel a bit like obstacles themselves.
You've got a point there. Barriers can be a bit of a double-edged sword. They're essential for, guiding people, dividing crowds, and managing those cues we talked about. But if they're not used well, they can actually become dangerous, especially in an emergency.
I see. It's not just about putting them up, it's about understanding when and where to use them.
Exactly. They have to be strategic about it.
And I imagine communication is super important in all of this.
Oh, communication is absolutely key. You're right. They not only need to keep the crowd informed, like think digital screens with updates, clear signage, announcements over the PA system, but they also have to maintain constant communication within the team itself.
So they're talking to the crowd and to each other at the same time. What kind of information are they sharing?
With the crowd, it's about real-time updates, things like crowd density in different areas, any delays with public transit, maybe changes to the schedule because of weather, just anything that helps people make good decisions about where to go and what to do.
It's about keeping everyone in the loop. What about within the team?
That's where things get really dynamic. Team members are constantly sharing what they're seeing, flagging any potential problems, requesting more resources in certain areas. It's this constant flow of information that lets them react quickly.
So who's gathering all this information? Is it all high-tech stuff like AI and cameras?
You might be surprised to learn that a lot of it is still good old-fashioned human observation. You've got stewards on the ground constantly watching and reporting back to a central control room.
Really? I would have thought AI and computer vision would be doing more of that by now.
They're becoming more common, definitely, but they haven't fully taken over.
Yeah.
Especially in very dense crowds, computer vision can still be unreliable. The human eye is still better at picking up on those subtle cues and changes in behavior that technology might miss.
So it's still a blend of human expertise and technology. That's fascinating. But I'm sure there are still areas where tech could improve things even more for crowd managers.
Oh, absolutely. There's always room for improvement. And as technology gets better, I think we're going to see some really exciting new tools and approaches to crowd management.
Now we're talking. What's on the crowd management wish list? Where does technology need to step up its game?
Well, one of the big things is real-time insights. Right now, crowd managers are often working with data that's, delayed or incomplete, especially with large crowds. Imagine a crowd map that updated instantly, showing you the density, the flow, even the overall mood of the crowd. That would be incredible.
A live dashboard of the whole event? Wow, what else?
Better predictions. Right now, those what-if scenarios are limited by what we've seen before. But imagine AI that could analyze data from tons of past events and spot potential problems that humans might miss.
Maybe like a crystal ball for crowd behavior.
Exactly. And then there's communication. Right now, it's mostly PA systems and signs. But imagine sending targeted messages to people's phones based on their location within the event space.
So you could send specific instructions to people in certain areas or even warn them about weather changes.
Exactly. And then there's the idea of smart infrastructure.
Smart infrastructure. What is that?
Think barriers and turnstiles that react in real time to the crowd. If a bottleneck forms, the barriers automatically adjust to redirect the flow, or turnstiles could slow down entry to prevent overcrowding.
That's wild. The infrastructure itself becomes intelligent.
Right. It's about using technology to make the environment more adaptable.
So we've got real-time insights, better predictions, advanced communication, smart infrastructure. Anything else on this crowd management wish list?
Oh, one more big one. The traffic light concept. Crowd managers would love to be able to control the flow of specific groups within a crowd, like a traffic light system for people. Imagine letting certain sections exit first, based on the real-time data.
Like a virtual traffic flow for humans. That's amazing. This whole conversation has been eye-opening. I had no idea how much went into crowd management. It's a whole science. It's incredible how much effort goes into keeping us safe at these events.
It really is. And as we gather more data and develop smarter systems, it's only going to get more fascinating.
Well, we're going to take a short break, but when we come back, we'll keep diving into the world of crowd management. Stay tuned.
And, as we get deeper into crowd management and how tech is changing things, it's interesting to see how it's not just about like the practical stuff, but also how the tools themselves are evolving.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, we were just talking about those smart barriers, the ones that react to how crowded things are getting. That's crazy how tech is changing the actual physical spaces of events.
It is.
Yeah.
But with these new tools, we got to think about how they actually serve the people in the crowd, right?
Yeah, totally.
Like imagine a system that could send personalized messages to people's phones based on where they are. Yeah, give them real-time updates on wait times for the bathroom or
Hmm.
direct them to less crowded areas.
That would be so helpful, especially at those massive festivals where it's easy to feel lost.
Exactly. It'd be like having your own personal guide in your pocket. But of course, with any new tech, we got to make sure it's used responsibly. Think about things like data privacy.
For sure. It's about finding that balance, right?
Hmm,
Using tech to make things better, but also doing it ethically and respecting everyone's privacy.
absolutely. And one area where that balance is really important is crowd monitoring. We were talking earlier about how human observation is still crucial, especially when it's really packed. But tech is playing a bigger role there too.
Right, and we talked about how computer vision isn't perfect in those situations. So how can tech help those human observers without being too intrusive?
That's the million-dollar question. One way is to use tech to give crowd managers a wider view of the event. Like drones with cameras, they can provide an aerial view of the crowd, which can be super helpful for spotting potential bottlenecks or areas that are getting too packed.
Makes sense. It's like having an extra set of eyes, but up in the air.
Exactly. But then there's the privacy issue, right? Are there ways to use these cameras and drones without collecting sensitive personal data?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Definitely. There are things like blurring faces in the images and other techniques that can protect people's privacy while still giving crowd managers valuable information. It's about using tech in a way that respects individual rights, you know?
It's like finding that sweet spot between security and freedom. We want to feel safe, but we don't want to feel like Big Brother is watching us constantly.
Exactly. It's tricky, and it's something we need to talk about as a society as this tech keeps getting more advanced.
Earlier, we talked about how crowd managers often have to work with data that's delayed or incomplete, especially during the event itself. Sounds like real-time data would be a game changer.
Oh, it absolutely would. Imagine having a system that could pull in data from everywhere, cameras, sensors, even social media, and give you those insights instantly. That would let crowd managers be so much more proactive and responsive.
It'd be like having a finger on the pulse of the event at all times. But all this data analysis, that takes some serious computing power, right?
It does. And that's where things like cloud computing and AI are making a huge difference. They're making it possible to process tons of data super fast, which is key for this kind of real-time crowd management.
So crowd management is becoming more data-driven. What are some ways this data can make the actual experience better for people attending these events?
One really cool application is personalized recommendations. Imagine an app that suggests the best time to hit up certain attractions or vendors based on how crowded things are in real time. That way people can avoid those super long lines.
Oh, that's a great idea. Like a custom itinerary that changes as the crowd changes.
Yeah. And as we collect more data and fine-tune the algorithms, those recommendations can get even more sophisticated and personalized.
So we've talked about using tech to improve crowd monitoring, communicate better, even make the experience more personalized. Are there any challenges in implementing these advanced technologies?
One of the biggest hurdles is infrastructure. Many older venues just weren't built with this tech in mind. So retrofitting them with all the sensors and cameras and network stuff, it can be expensive and complicated.
That makes sense. And it's not just the physical infrastructure, is it? You also need people who know how to manage and understand all this data, right?
Absolutely. Building a skilled workforce is huge. You need people who understand data analytics, AI, cybersecurity, on top of traditional crowd management skills. It's a lot.
Wow, it sounds like this whole field is changing so fast. It's amazing to see how tech is transforming the way we manage crowds and create safer, more enjoyable events.
It really is an exciting time to be in this field. And as technology keeps getting better, who knows what we'll be able to do in the future.
You know, it's really wild to think about how far we've come with crowd management. We started talking about understanding how crowds behave and anticipating problems, and now we're talking about drones and AI and personalized recommendations. It's like the future of events is already here.
I know, right? It's amazing.
Yeah.
But even with all this incredible technology, we can't forget that crowd management is really about people.
Right.
Tech can give us awesome tools and insights, but it's still those skilled professionals who have to use those tools the right way and make smart decisions to keep everyone safe and happy.
That's a really important point. It's easy to get excited about the new gadgets and gizmos, but we can't forget that crowd management is all about people, understanding how they act, what they need, and making sure they feel safe and have a good time.
Exactly. And you know what's really exciting about this field? The potential to use tech to actually strengthen those human connections.
Oh, interesting.
Like, think about a system that could help reunite lost kids with their parents faster, or an app that lets people easily find their friends in a huge crowd. Those are just a couple of ways tech can actually improve the social side of events.
I love that. So it's not just about managing the crowd, it's about creating a sense of community.
Exactly. And moving forward, I think it's crucial to explore these people-focused uses of technology. It's not just about being efficient or controlling everything. It's about creating those memorable, meaningful experiences for everyone.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into crowd management, what are some key takeaways for our listeners?
Well, the big one is that crowd management is constantly changing. It's not just security guards and barriers anymore. It's about understanding crowd psychology, using data, and embracing these new technologies to create events that are safe, enjoyable, and truly memorable.
It's about creating a seamless experience from the minute someone buys their ticket to the moment they head home. And it sounds like there's a lot of cool innovation happening in this field.
There is. And I think we're just getting started. As technology keeps advancing, I bet we'll see even more creative ways to approach crowd management.
This has been an awesome journey behind the scenes of something most people probably don't think twice about. We've learned so much about the science, the technology, and the human side of creating successful events. It's clear that crowd management is more important than ever.
Absolutely. Events are getting bigger and more complex, and tech is changing how we experience the world. Crowd management plays a huge role in making sure everyone stays safe and has a great time.
Well, that's a wrap for our deep dive into crowd management. We hope you enjoyed it, and we encourage you to keep learning and thinking about how technology is shaping the world around us. Until next time.